First off, she is a writer and comedian, and it's been a while since we've heard from her. It's great to have her back. Happy New Year, Megan Gailey.
Hi, Happy New Year. I asked for no Christmas presents and for all the money to go to Georgia, so I'm taking this one on as my own personal victory.
Thank you, Megan Gailey, for the victory in Georgia, in addition to all the other people who also helped. And also, she is a writer, comedian, actor, activist. She does it all. It's Grace Parra. Welcome back.
What's up, guys? Good to see you. Happy New Year, 2021. We did it.
We did it. We lived.
We lived.
Guys, can we? How are you celebrating the victory in Georgia? Are you doing like arugula bombs or like a latte cannon or like what liberal things are you doing?
Celebrating with Antifa, maybe? Just going to an Antifa rally?
Cool. I was thinking abortion cheerleading. Anybody doing that?
Great.
Yeah.
I love that idea for us.
My family text thread is really popping. Like, everyone's on East Coast time, so I wake up and there's like 20 texts. And so the victory happened, and then my mom got the vaccine this morning in Indiana.
Oh, wow, congrats.
And I didn't know it was going to happen, and so it was. And she said that I could tell the Hysteria listeners.
Oh,
So it was just like I shot out of bed. I've never been so excited to be up at 7:15 in the morning.
Oh, that's so great. She said, so there were a lot of, what was the scene like where she was getting, what was the vaccine like?
Well, it was, she went to a hospital like by their house that she actually worked at for 15 years. She's a nurse. And she said, she had a little outfit on. She turned a look, I think, for sure. And had her hair done. And she said, there were some bumps. She asked some questions like a typical nurse. And she said it didn't hurt at all and she feels great. And I bet she's going to run through a wall later today, like the Kool-Aid man.
Oh my God, I love that. That's so great. It's, vaccine rollout is going slowly, but it's going. So
Yeah.
To the people who get it, congrats. I'm very much looking forward to, it's the only time in my life I've been looking forward to like having someone poke a needle in me.
I love a needle poke. I don't know about anybody else out there. I don't mind it. I mean, that
A shot
sounds like
doesn't bother me.
Shot
No.
doesn't bother me. There's something
Doesn't bother
about
me
it
at all.
that feels like I can check a box. I did
Yes.
a thing today.
You're a monster.
I agree, Grace.
Yeah, Megan, you feel me.
Guys,
What would we
I'm
make very
terrified.
good? Alyssa's terrified.
I'm terrified of needles. The last time I had to get a shot, other than a flu shot, actually funny, Congressman now, Ronnie Jackson, who is a psychopath, but was my doctor at the time, he hunted me down. I tried to hide from the yellow fever shot, and Pfeiffer was in my office, and he had cooked this up with Ronnie that they would ambush me. And I became hysterical in both ways, laughing and crying. And then it really wasn't that bad, but it hasn't shaken my fear of getting jabbed. But I'm ready for it.
That's like what they do to dogs and cats.
That's right,
corner them
Megan.
and trick them.
They tried to trick me, and I just was yelping and howling. It was terrible. I'm sure Pfeiffer remembers it vividly.
I saw a video this week of a puppy getting its vaccines, and they were distracting the puppy with a bowl of kibble, treats for the puppy, and the puppy wasn't even noticing. So maybe next time you need to get vaccinated, they should just give you a bowl of treats, Alyssa.
Yeah.
You guys, I just should have taken the weed before I took the shot, and I would have been okay. These are the things we learn.
That's true. And that's a perfect segue into what I was...
See what I was doing there?
Yeah, that was great co-hosting, Alyssa. So I was reading the National Review this morning because A, some of the people who write there are good writers, even though they're wrong a lot. And B, I was kind of on a Schadenfreude trip. And I was reading a piece by Kevin Williamson. And this isn't the point of the piece, but this paragraph jumped out to me because it kind of resonates with what we're talking about. He wrote, "A vice is not a problem. An unusual vice is a problem. An unusual virtue or an unusual practice of personal discipline can be an even bigger problem. Ask someone who doesn't drink how often some interested party inquires, politely or not, what's wrong with you? Are you an alcoholic in recovery, a Mormon, a moral scold, or on a diet? Subtext, are you implying that there's something wrong with me?" So, ladies, we are in January, which means for a lot of people, it's dry January. For some people, it's dry forever. For some people, it's dry never. But dry January every year seems to kind of bring to the surface the kind of fraught nature of our relationship with alcohol, and especially during a pandemic. So Megan, I know that you had some thoughts on this topic, so I want to start with you. Are you doing dry January? Have you ever done like a dry month? And what's your reasoning in one direction or another?
I have never done it. I have made fun of it openly, and I am doing it now. So I'm the full spectrum. I'm doing it a little bit modified. I started Monday. My husband's birthday is the 15th, so we're gonna, drink on that one day, and then I'll go back to it. I wanted to do it this year because my drinking and weed has taken such a drastic uptick because of the pandemic. I was smoking so much weed and drinking so much that my tolerance got so high. And then I would have to be it's a slippery slope. I come from a family that has a long history of alcohol abuse and alcohol issues. And I lost a friend during the pandemic to an overdose. It's something that's really, really on my mind. And I'm trying to not do it in a way that's okay, I won't drink for this month and then I'll feel good for the rest of the year. I want to find new activities. I want to find replacements. And it's tough because it's so dark out right now, but it's I want to be outside more. We got all these face masks and we're trying to do that. And I am trying to do it in a way that's reflective and not just a box check. A recovering alcoholic once told me, drink in a way that you never have to stop drinking. Mm-hmm. And I am drinking in a way where I would have to stop drinking pretty soon. Mm-hmm. So I'm just trying, I don't want to do that. I want to be able to have, champagne, but I do have a problem. I rely on it a lot, and I know the blood that pulses through me, and I just need to be more aware.
Mm-hmm. And just to quickly note, we're going to put in the show notes links to resources if people feel like they have problematic relationships with alcohol or whatever. This is also just us talking about our own issues. We're not diagnosing anybody. We're not judging anybody. We're just talking amongst ourselves so that you guys can hear it. So just that being said, Alyssa, I know that you have a different experience and view of dry January. So why don't you share yours?
I've never been dry. I will probably never be dry. No, but I'm serious, but I'm joking. When I actually went years without drinking back in my 20s, when weed was available, when it was I just always needed something to unwind a little bit at the end of the day. And I've tried the Calm app and everything. And the truth is I just enjoy it. I feel good when I do it. And to Megan's point, I went to a school and had friends who did lots and lots of drugs. And so I have always been hyper aware of exactly what Megan said. Do it so I never have to stop. It's 2 hits of the joint. It's not the whole joint. It's a little buzzed. It's not super high. It's having 5 ounces. Also, Weight Watchers, very good for calibrating your wine intake because you will literally go without food if you have too much wine. And so I have always kept it to 5 ounces, give or take, with dinner. And at the beginning of the pandemic, it was March 13th that we left the city and came upstate, where I have been ever since. And within 2 days of getting up here, I was looking in the mirror. I'm girl, here's the deal. You can never have a drink before dinner. There is no day drinking. There is no slipping outside the bounds of what I had normally done. And then by 2 weeks, it had been 2 weeks. And within those 2 weeks, aside from this podcast, I lost every stitch of work and income that I had put together over the past 2 years. And I was you know what? Doesn't fucking matter. It's there is nothing, if I'm going to do something to make myself feel better, it can't be that. And so that is how Jam was born. For me, you guys know, but it's exactly what you're saying. I needed something that kept me busy, that kept me focused. I set goals for myself. Because also, funny enough, my husband does not drink at all. I mean, he'll have like a glass of wine once or twice a year. If I am experimenting with experimental cocktails, he'll have a sippy sippy, as we call it, just like a little taste. And it's true, when we first got together, people would be like, I'm like, oh yeah, he doesn't drink. They'd be like, oh. I was like, no, he's not an alcoholic. Not that there's anything wrong with that. He just doesn't drink. But that was always the default first reaction. It's like, oh, good for him. And I was like, no, it's just like he doesn't. So that's been my thing. And the weed, I keep it in check. I'm only allowed to go to the weed store every couple of weeks. And, I've kept it together. I'm proud of myself.
I think that, there was an article that ran in the New York Times on Christmas that I was thinking a lot about as I was helping Caroline put the show together this week. And it's called, the headline was "Vodka in Your Coffee Cup When Pandemic Drinking Goes Too Far." And there was a quote in there that says, "No one is talking about glasses of wine anymore," said Ms. Duke, who works for a dog grooming app and lives in Manhattan with her 2 teenage sons. "People are measuring by the bottle. That scares me. I know too many women who went from 1 or 2 glasses to 2 bottles of wine to vodka in your coffee cup." So, Grace, I know you're a non-drinker. And can you talk a little bit about like what your decision was behind that and the way that people treat you since you've made that decision?
Yes, of course, of course. It's been alcohol was a huge part of my life for so long, and for many, many years. I mean, I started drinking as a teenager, but I saw my family drink. I come from a family similar to yours, Megan. Everybody drinks, and everybody did it to excess all the time. And I think there's something maybe cultural too about the Latin Americans love their booze, so it was expected that I would do that. I enjoyed it for a really, really long time, and then at some point in my late 20s, I started to hyperbolically say, "Oh, I'm never going to drink again," every time I would wake up with a hangover. And as we've mentioned before on this podcast, I'm a spicy little pepper, and I forget that I'm like barely 5'1", and me trying to drink with other people who are not 5'1" inevitably led to me drinking what might be okay for them, but was never okay for me. 3 drinks for me would make me black out. And I never developed a huge tolerance. And as the years went on, it started to make me feel awful. I just hated it. I hated the feeling of waking up hungover the next day. And I always thought like, well, this is just the way it's got to be. You drinking is fun. Let's just keep doing that. And there was a trip that I took with my then boyfriend, now husband, Niall, in October of 2018. We went to New York for a week. And drinking in New York is its own beast. I mean, you know how easy it is to go from happy hour at, 4 or 5 o'clock to pre-dinner drinks with somebody, to drinking at dinner, to then the first round of bars afterwards, to then the after party, whatever. You're just drinking all day long.
It's how you get most of your calories on some
yes,
days.
Yes, exactly. And
there's no driving. Too.
There's
so it's
no
like the easiest place to be drunk.
So it feels like there's so few consequences. But for that week, we had planned so many different dinners and, drinks with friends. And I left that week feeling worse than I had in years. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to stop and see what happens. And I've stopped since. So October of 2018, it's now 2021. And with the exception of a champagne toast at my wedding and a couple little sippy sippies, because Alyssa, I do feel if somebody's making a fancy cocktail, a sip here and there is fine, but I've not been drunk. I've not ordered a drink. I haven't, consumed an entire drink since. And it was all because there wasn't a bottoming out. I didn't like the way I felt. And I didn't like that I was insisting or believing that anytime I associated with friends, there had to be alcohol involved. Anytime I caught up with family, there had to be alcohol involved. Anytime there was a celebration, there had to be alcohol involved. Anytime I didn't feel great, there had to be alcohol involved. And again, I wasn't getting blackout every time I drank. It's just that I reached for it constantly. And I didn't like that about myself. And if I can also make this point, vanity really started to kick in because I felt like I could see dark circles under my eyes. I felt bloated. I felt like I was aging more quickly, and I didn't like that. And I was like, what if I didn't drink? Would that help? And it did. And it's one of those things that's been keeping me going. When I remember how I used to look and feel, just like dry patches on my face, and just feeling icky. It's because alcohol's, anything in moderation is totally fine, but alcohol is marketed in a way that makes us feel like it's sexy and fun and cute and cool. But at the core of it, it is, it's poisonous. And I think in excess, it can be really, really damaging. So anyway, long-winded way of saying that I was very lucky to be able to turn away from alcohol. And I feel I'm very grateful for having been through that journey.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it sounds like the decision that you made was one that was just completely like, I don't like how I feel. It wasn't like,
Yes.
you know, and I think I'm doing dry January this year, and I've done a couple dry months in the last couple years. And it's funny because like at the beginning of the dry month, I'm always like, oh, I don't want to do this. And then by like a week in, I always am like, I'm never going to drink again. And then at the end of the month, I feel great. And then then it's gradually kind of builds up to a state of like what it was before. And I think the pandemic has really magnified things, made things, because you spend so much time alone with your thoughts. Mm-hmm. And so you're not only like, you know, maybe I'm drinking more during the pandemic, maybe I'm not. I don't know, but I do know that I'm thinking about it more. And I think by the end of like December, I was sort of like, by the end of the day, I was like looking forward to it. And I was like, I don't think I like this. I don't want to like go through the day being like, okay, when the sun is like down, I can have a drink. Like, yeah, I just didn't like it. But, you know, I think Grace, I think dry January has kind of normalized the the normal, like a normal person just being like, yeah, I just decided not to eat veal anymore. I just decided not to, drink alcohol anymore. It's kind of normalized it. But any other time of the year, I think if you're not drinking, people are kind of like, do they tend to be a little bit like confrontational about it? Like, have people tried to pressure you?
Yeah, the questions definitely come up. There's definitely an assumption of like, now that I'm married, it's like, oh, are you pregnant? Which is not the case. And yeah, the questions of like, well, who hurt you in your childhood come up. Why can't you just enjoy a drink? I haven't felt too much pressure. And I think it's because from my inner circle of friends. And I think it's because over the years, that inner circle of friends saw me increasingly uncomfortable with the drinking that I was doing. I mean, they heard me say, oh, I'm never drinking again, hyperbolically, jokingly. But I think when I took it seriously and said, I think I'm going to stop, they were like, okay, yeah, that's expected. It makes sense. And also, I think that most of my friends and family have been willing to hear me out, and that helps a lot. It's not just like, oh, you're not drinking, quick judgment and then moving on to the next topic. It's more of like, oh, you're not drinking. That's awesome. Tell me about it. When did you make the decision? How's it been? So it's opened the door to longer conversations, which I've been grateful for. The other thing that I'll say too is that there's something about pandemic drinking in particular is interesting. We're in a period right now where we're not socializing as much, or we shouldn't be socializing, Puerto Vallarta, except if you're there, and that's fine. But I think that a lot of people who we maybe would have kept around in our inner circles, as drinking buddies, we're not seeing necessarily as frequently. So for people who are kind of worried about the social element, what happens if I stop drinking? What will people say? Am I going to have to justify this to myself all the time? Which is completely understandable, and it is a real factor to contend with. There is a kind of beautiful element of being in the middle of a pandemic right now, where we're not socializing as much as we would be otherwise. It's almost like a built-in opportunity to take stock of your friends and family, to take stock of who is around you, who makes you feel good, who you want to be with, who will be supportive of you if you decide to make a lifestyle change, rather than people who might be judgmental and who you only ever saw because you were drinking with them anyway. I will say that there are elements of not drinking that there's people that I don't hang out with anymore. There's definitely people that I've stopped seeing because I used to only drink with them. And when that's taken out of the equation, is what's left enough for a friendship or a relationship? Maybe not. And it's a little tough to realize that might be the case. But again, it's a pandemic. We're all kind of doing that anyway. We're all already.
We can reinvent ourselves.
Yes, yes, exactly.
I come out like, if I came out of the sober and be like, what happened in the pandemic? I do think that the four of us, we live in Alyssa's out in the country, but lives in New York. The three of us live in LA. I remember when I first moved to LA, it was for pilot season, and everybody was like, oh, we don't drink during pilot season because, they want to look good and they're memorizing lines. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to drink during pilot season. But then there are other parts of the country where not drinking is not as acceptable as it is in Los Angeles and it is in New York. Like, I mean, Erin's from Wisconsin. I'm from the Indianapolis. Like, if I were to tell certain people back in Indiana that I wasn't drinking, they'd be like, "You fucking baby!" Like, they truly
what
wouldn't
are you
even
doing?
understand. Yeah, they wouldn't even understand it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really, like, the cultural pressure that I think Grace brought up before is definitely real. And also, like, living in different places, you kind of see how different cultures drink. Because, like, you know, in LA, it's perfectly acceptable. LA sober is you just smoke a lot of pot, which is what I am during dry January. I'm like LA sober, which has been just wonderful. I've been eating so much candy. But you know, but in, like, when I go home for the holidays, it's like people crack open a beer at noon and have like a low buzz on until like 6 p.m. And at that point it's pitch black. And so people call it a day, and like, so nobody is ever like wasted in my family, but it's like a like festive Christmas buzz that lasts 6 hours, and then we go to bed at 7 p.m. Like, but nobody has a hangover the next day because we're eating cheese. Also,
And those little raw meat sandwiches. I know about you guys.
I ate one on camera. It was just a Ritz cracker. It was just a Ritz cracker with some ground beef on it that hadn't been cooked. But Alyssa, you mentioned before that you had like a group of friends in college that did a lot of drugs. Was there? Can you remember any instances of people making decisions to like dial back on substance use and having that it be difficult for them to continue socializing with that group? Or was the group pretty chill?
The group was pretty chill, and we're talking, like, here's the thing. It's like the people who I surrounded myself with smoked pot. They were not like quote unquote hardcore drug users, right? And so, and the thing about it is I went to very athletic schools, so people would always dial back when like ski season started. Like, I didn't have a bunch of friends who were getting super fucking wasted and hitting, you know, Stowe Mountain. It's like people would be like, oh, they'd go skiing, maybe they'd smoke a little bit on the way there and on the way back. But no, when I was, the one thing, you know, like you have those things when you're young that will always stick with you no matter what. And so when I was in high school, a friend of mine took much too much acid, and she went down to the river, which is what you do when you did drugs. You go down to the river, and she was killed by a train. Oh, you know, she thought the light was like the stars, and she was killed. Oh no! And so ever since then, it's like, of all the things I've ever experimented with, if I liked anything too much, I never did it again. Wow. So it's like I do, like I'm listening to all you guys, and then I think of what I said at the beginning of the fucking conversation. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get so many comments about being an alcoholic. And I'm not, because I'm actually just very, and I'm not defending myself. I'm just saying that it's like, because of my personality, I could never be. Because I never let myself have too much fun. So I'll be like, okay, well, girl.
Let's drill down on that real quick, just to use some professor language.
Yeah.
I don't know where that came from. It's 2021, new me.
It was very good. It's why
I'm
not?
a professor
I'm wearing
now.
a button-down shirt.
Yeah. Wearing a half hoodie that in honor of Mitch McConnell. This is fuck that guy, because fuck him forever. But let's talk a little bit about how people pass. You know, Grace has talked about people being judgmental of sobriety. Like, Megan, I wonder if you've experienced witnessing judgment of people either drinking too much or too little. And do you think that people are more judgmental of women's relationships with alcohol than men's relationships with alcohol?
This is,
like, there's, on one hand, there's the wine mom, which is like, yay, it's wine o'clock, like cute little wall hangings about how much wine you drink. But on the other hand, like a lady who is drunk, like, seems to cross a line that is like, she's completely no longer part of respectable society.
Yeah, I always, like, I think the way it was framed to me growing up was, because I have two older brothers, and they started drinking younger than I did. I didn't really start drinking until, like, I went to Europe the summer before college, and I, like, drank there, you know, and then never looked back. But I remember...
Did you get a white merit badge for that?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, they gave me a Capri cigarette that I was able to put in my beret. I remember people being like, well, if girls get too drunk, something bad will happen to them. Like, and if boys get too drunk, something bad won't happen. You know, like they shouldn't drive, but no one's going to sexually assault them, or, you know, take advantage of them in the many ways that women can be taken advantage of. But like, I've always been like a nice drunk. If anything, I've been sort of like an overly flirtatious, slutty drunk. And so now that I'm married, it's like, well, it doesn't matter if I'm a slutty drunk. It's just me annoying my husband to try and have sex with me. And he's like, no, I don't want to have sex with you. You're like slurring your words, which is kind of a revelation. I'm like, oh, a lot of people have had sex with me while I was slurring my words. So I do think I haven't felt more judged. I have seen men in my life who have actually been more judged. And I think some of that is because men also can become violent. Like if I'm wasted and get angry for some reason, I'll probably trip and fall over and then be down for the count. But like if a man is wasted and angry, that's a really, really terrifying thing. And I do know men that were afraid of who they became when they were drunk, and that led them to become sober. In a way that I have not seen like female friends go through that, because we're just not destructive, like breaking things, ruining things drunks. I think we're more docile.
Alyssa, you know, I was thinking about like alcohol and what would happen if everybody just went dry. And my first thought, having been a journalist in the past, was that journalism would end. Like, because so many stories come from taking a source out for drinks and then both of you loosen up a little bit, and then somebody tells you something they shouldn't, and then you follow up with them. And anyway, Alyssa, what do you think would happen if everybody in Washington stopped drinking? Like, how much of Washington is fueled by like happy hour?
I mean, it's actually funny that you say this, because the first White House Correspondents' Dinner I ever went to was with Lynn Sweet from the Chicago Tribune. And I was so afraid of having a drink and saying something I shouldn't that I had not one drink. And at the end of the night, she's like, how drunk are you? And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, well, you haven't said a word. And I was like, so scared of you. I shouldn't have come. Truly. But I mean, it's like, it's how you grease it's how you grease the skids. It's like, oh, come on, have a drink. Though the one thing I do think makes it better and easier is that like you really can't accept drinks. And reporters can't accept drinks, really. So it's like, am I going to pay to have my own wine with a reporter or by myself? I would pick by myself, but that's
Come on.
DC, like I have partied in DC.
Yeah.
It's definitely like a boozy city.
I think
it's like everyone's so pent up.
Yeah.
You know? And then they go out and they just act insane. I have to be honest, I did not go out in Washington like ever.
That's probably, I mean, that's part of the reason you're so cool, honestly.
Yeah, yes.
Like,
Thank you, guys.
Part of it feels like this weird, like, old, you know, it's a city that is, the most important people there are way older and way whiter than the rest of America at large. And they kind of have a Mad Men attitude still. Like, whiskey in the middle of the day is fine. Like, I imagine that John Boehner smells like one of those trays in a bar where all the extra booze spills over. Like, he just, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, Grace, I want to end with you, since you're the person who's been sober the longest. What are some thoughts that you have of people who are on the fence about going sober or not going sober? Like, how was how did that decision work for you when you first made it?
Well, first I'm super sensitive to the fact that everybody's level of attachment to alcohol is different. And there is, as you've mentioned, clinical addiction, which requires, professional guidance and intervention that I understand that there are a lot of programs out there that are really beneficial. So for those who are listening, for whom that is, their path, I know that there are resources out there who that can help. I'm talking more out of a personal experience, as you mentioned, and my experience being able to basically have the autonomy and make the decision to say, I'm just going to not do this. And again, I have to express gratitude for being able to kind of to see that come to fruition. But all that's to say that the words of wisdom I have are, you're going to feel great if you do it. And you don't have to make a commitment to never drinking again. Just take it day by day. That's the biggest thing. When I stopped in October of 2018, it was just a random day, and it wasn't, didn't have a cute title to it. And I wasn't like, okay, in 30 days, I'm going to see how I feel. I was just like, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do this anymore. And I didn't put an end date on it. And I didn't tell everybody that I knew either. And I think that's something that everybody has different levels of needs in terms of accountability. And for some people, it does help to be as vocal about it as possible and to go on social media and talk about it and to have a countdown for how many days you're staying sober or without a drink. And I totally, totally respect that. For other people, myself included, I made the decision. I told my boyfriend at the time, now husband, told a couple of other people in my life, and then just did it and didn't really talk about it, because for me, talking about it made it this big thing. And I think that I needed for it to be less magnified in order to feel like it was something that I could continue with. And as time has gone on, now I look back and I'm like, whoa, it's awesome that I've kind of been able to stick with this for as long as I have, but it wasn't the initial intention. And that might be a strategy for people who are out there who are thinking about stopping drinking. So yeah, and as we've kind of discussed, and I think this could be its own episode, and I would love to get into this too. What are the other things that you do in place of drinking? Jams. I mean, my God, Alyssa, that is the perfect path. For me, it's, God, what have I done? I watch a lot more TV now, which is probably not great. I cook a lot more. I also eat a lot of shit. I mean, I eat sweets all the time. I probably replace some of the alcohol with sugar, which is not great. But I don't wake up hungover, so that's a good thing. And I get a lot more sleep. I do get a lot more sleep. And it's not like that hungover kind of, terrible sleep where you wake up in cold sweats in the middle of the night, which I was doing, or wake up the next day completely unable to move off the couch. And that feels nice and gratifying. So yeah, I mean, there's lots of little things that you can do, but the biggest thing is to just measure within yourself what is going to feel good, take it day by day, and know that you can pivot and adjust constantly. You don't have to take on the world. You can just take it day by day and say, I'm not going to drink today, and see how you feel. I mean, Erin, to your point earlier, you wake up after a week and you might feel great and you might just want to continue doing that forever. Or maybe you have a drink on special occasions, or, you take the path that I think Alyssa set out, which is fucking amazing, which is, I just like to take the edge off a little bit at night, and I know my own limits. I'm not going to go past this point. Great. Or you black out every once in a while. I don't know. That's okay too. I mean, I had a lot of fun blacking out.
That's the Megan way.
Yes. Exactly. And I will say also, to the earlier point about the different expectations and judgments on women, there is this beautiful period in one's life where it is kind of fun for you to be a drunk girl in your 20s. And I also think that age can, I don't know, like there's so many women, like I look at who's an example of a woman who's older who is kind of boozy, who we all love, because they exist.
Chelsea
like
Handler?
Yeah, Chelsea Handler or Joan Rivers. Like, it was kind of part of their personality, and it's fun, and it's, I don't know, it can also be a lot of fun too. So I don't think that sobriety or alcoholism has to be your entire personality.